Broadcasting live to Bills Mafia worldwide with Greg Tompsett and Aaron Quinn.
Welcome to the NFL.
Doesn't matter what's happened before today. Today's a brand new day. It's a brand new season.
Your number one podcast for objective Buffalo Bills coverage. No matter where you are, we got you covered.
Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo podcast. You are joining your host Greg Tompsett along with my partner in crime Aaron Quinn. Aaron, how we doing?
My man, what is happening? We're finally turned towards spring here in sunny Western New York.
It's beautiful here today.
First time in my life went down to the Broadway market pre-Easter. I've heard that's a tradition around here. It was
Did you get a butter lamb?
Decent. We did not. I think we'll just get one at Tops. There was like a long line for it, and you can just get them over at Tops. But the experience was cool. We had some pierogies for lunch and filled up on Polish sausage and pierogies. So it consumed all of my calorie intake for the week in one day. So I'm pretty much screwed for the rest of the week. Other than that, though, good times. And I'm here to talk to you. And you were just saying offline, first time we haven't any like news to discuss to open the show.
Yeah, it's weird. Like I honestly, I'll tell people one of the things I used to jog my memory on the timing of things. I'll go to the Buffalo Bills PR feed and look because they're pretty good with the chronological order of things. Yeah. And I looked, and literally the only thing that's happened since then is he who should not be named rejoined the team.
We're not going to talk about it.
Bobby Hart will be back this training camp to make the young defensive ends feel good about themselves before he gets cut going into the season. And nothing else has happened. It's really been pretty clean. So we have an awesome guest tonight that we'll bring on in just a moment. But first, we were talking pre-show and we've been talking offline, kind of getting our plans together here. Bookseats.com. Make sure you guys are checking them out. They're sending us out to the draft. We're going to be, giving you guys tidbits and shots of all the different experience, our flight out there, the hotel they're putting us up at. They're awesome people to work with. Really, really excited. We got a couple of people coming out there to join with us that have been using the site to be able to get their trip set. You can go on there, search for Las Vegas, get yourself out to the draft. But the big thing that we're excited about is when schedule release time comes, we're going to be get ready to see all these different trips. I might take myself out to Los Angeles. If
you should do it. Treat yourself. Treat yourself.
Maybe do the show live, the post-game show live from the hotel. We'll see.
I would do it, yeah.
We'll see where things go. I'm really excited. They've been awesome to work with, and I can't wait to see everything that we can do. We'll get to meet up with the team from Bookseats while we're out in Vegas.
Yeah, I'm super excited about it. And I'm, like you said, really excited about the schedule release. Yeah. Probably getting suckered into doing that Chicago one. I think I've told you my brother's probably not going to let me off the hook. So I at least want to get a good
game.
Deal.
Yeah, there's a Cleveland game with my friends. We'll have to look for somewhere to stay up there and get tickets for them. So we'll use it for that too.
Yeah, exactly. I might as well get a good deal if I'm being forced to go see the team. So we'll see.
I like it. So without further ado, tonight's main guest, you guys know him from the Locked On Bills. You should know him from the Draft Network and everything he does. Our man, Joe Marino. Joe, welcome aboard, brother.
What's going on, dudes? Good to be on with you. I didn't know Aaron was going to be here tonight. I might not have agreed to this if I didn't.
I wouldn't have done it.
Yeah, I try to keep that private just to make sure that we don't lose.
Come on,
I could tell.
Come on now.
No, welcome. This is your time of year, man. I think so. A lot of people know you from Locked On Bills, and obviously you do an awesome job. I don't understand how you do a daily show for the Bills, but it's fantastic. Aaron and I listen every single day. But I don't think everybody knows, everything that you do and everything you've done going through the Scouting Academy, going through, Draft Dudes, working for the Draft Network, everything that you've done here. This is your Super Bowl. This is your time of year, man. How does it feel being this, just now, whatever it is, 16 days out from the go live?
Been working on this class since May of 2021. So there has been a lot of work, and I've learned everything I'm going to learn about these players in this draft class, and I'm ready to see these names get picked and find out who's going where and get ready for the next phase of covering these players. And so I love it. It's so much fun, but it's definitely at that point now where there's fatigue. And the analysis is just crazy. Social media can be tough, and I'm just ready for draft day, and it can't come soon enough.
Yeah, before we jump into sort of draft specific questions, kind of piggybacking off of that amount of work you do real quick, because I've been around Eric, right, for a long time and see the amount of work he does. I'm not a film guy. You guys are insane. You guys are a different level of you. I'm a cut up.
I try and my eyes want to pop out of my head.
Cuts it up for me. I'm that kind of guy. And just to kind of maybe quick rundown of what it takes to go from being pointed towards a player to having a full good understanding of who a player is, a round grade on where a player is, like what kind of process do you have to take per player? Give us understanding the type of workload you're dealing with.
So that's why we start in May, is because there's so much ground to cover to get to the point where we are now, ready for the draft. And I'm really, what's the word I'm looking for? I love our process at the Draft Network, where we start by watching players in our region. We have 6 members on our scouting staff. 4 of us are full-time. We have 2 part-time guys, and we spread out the entire country. And so I'm responsible for the ACC, the AAC, and then we split up the SEC. So I have Florida, South Carolina, and Tennessee from the SEC. That's my
some good football to watch.
A lot of good football to watch. A lot of players. The Bills like to pick players from the ACC and the AAC, yeah. So that works out quite well for me. And so you spend the summer writing up preliminary scouting reports. You watch the film, you do strengths and weaknesses, and kind of put a projection on round grade. Then you follow your players throughout the season, right? So you have your first exposure is the preseason stuff, watching their previous tape. Then you watch them in season. And then starting right around Thanksgiving, we start to write our final scouting reports for players in our own region. And that's where you go right back through that list, and you include now all the players that emerged that you never heard of before the season that are now, on the radar. And so you work through that. And then starting in January, we enter our cross-check process. And this is where I expand my scope beyond the ACC, the AAC, Florida, Tennessee, and South Carolina. And now I start to cross-check the entire country. And so what I love about that is we go through the entire list, and every day the same people watch the same player. So first player on the board, whoever it is, Aiden Hutchinson, Kyle Hamilton, we do 3 players a day, and then everybody cross-checks them individually. We have a scouting meeting every day where the regional scout presents that player to the group. We share our grades, we talk about them, and then the next day we move on to the next 3. And so it's a very thorough process. We're proud of our process. We think it's robust and it's comprehensive. In a lot of ways, it mirrors what teams do. And we've got a couple of guys that have worked for teams. Dre Harris, a 7-year NFL scout. Brentley Weissman, 3 years in intern with the Patriots as well, and on top of time with the Chargers. So we love our process. It is a robust one. It's long, but I feel like we do the best we can to make sure we haven't left anything out. I think one of the great scouting philosophies that I've been told that I try to adopt is scout like you're afraid you're going to miss something, right? Because you're the whole thing is you're just looking for disqualifiers. You're trying to figure out what players are and what they aren't and what would move people up or down the board, and it's all risk assessment. I'm scouting in a vacuum, right? I'm trying to figure out what can I learn about this player that is going to give me the information necessary to understand what the risk is, and then from there, what is that risk worth? For some players, top 10 picks. For some players, a UDFA grade, and then a lot of in between. So that's kind of our process. It's a year-long deal, and we're getting close to the finish line here with the draft a couple weeks away.
I got to say, I love a good process. I don't know about you, Greg.
I trust it.
Yeah,
I trust it. So, as we go through one other quick thing, just out of curiosity, how often is there a shocking or surprising gap or variance when you get to those meetings?
Every day.
Yeah.
Every day. And what's interesting is you never know if you're going to be that guy, right? That's just like crazy high. And there's 6 of us, right? So it's a lot of it's very, very close. But then there's always that high man. There's always that low man on every single player. And it's funny. It's funny which ones I find myself to be the low man. And for this year, the player is Christian Harris out of Alabama, where everybody on the team gave him a 2nd-round grade. I gave him an early day 3 grade, and I was that guy. But it's every day it's some player, and we don't go at it in a combative way. That's not good.
That's what Twitter's for.
but it shouldn't be. That's what I hate about Twitter. That's why it's like, even the three of us disagree on players, and it's like people will tag us to try to like stir something up. It's
like you're gonna tattle.
And it's what's funny. What they don't know is that we're just in our DMs talking about how people are trying to provoke us. It's like, nope, we're not going to fight over this. It's not that big of a deal. We see a player differently. We'll find out in 3 years who was right.
And we'll all sign up as soon as the Bills take them, right?
Yeah, the idea that there is a definitive right or wrong is what kills me.
Absolutes, man. That's what we've been pounding the table at this show all offseason. Is like, when you're talking draft, do not speak in absolutes, because nobody knows what's going to happen as soon as that clock goes. That's what makes it crazy.
Obviously, today, in the last day or so, the Buffalo Bills handle tweet announcing the Josh Allen one has come back around.
Is that why I saw that? A lot of people talking about this. I had no idea what that was about.
So that came back out, and people reading the comments of, some outlandish responses of like denouncing fanhood and like calling for Beans firing.
It's such an emotional.
It's hysterical. Even Thurman Thomas quote tweeted it earlier tonight saying, "Hey, I had never seen the comments here, but man, you guys are crazy." So it just goes to show that there are a lot of things that even when there's consensus, even when there are other really smart people that agree, we still don't know. Like, it's just not a defined science. Yes, the best people who have a really good product, you guys, your process, you're going to be right more than you're wrong. You're probably going to be right quite a bit more than you're wrong. But everyone's still going to miss. There's still going to be misses. And the fact that people have this like concrete order that no, if you get him, it's a success, and if you get this next guy, that is a failure. I mean, they're the same tier. Like, it's the same relative idea. Well, but you guys are crazy.
I know we're going to end up being way longer on this show than we want to, because I do have another question for you, Joe, that wasn't on the.
Let me respond to before you get there. I want to expand on something that Greg said there. If you haven't missed, then you haven't scouted. Okay, like let's first of all establish that, and then secondly, there is an entire human element to this that makes it very, very difficult to predict how players are going to fare in the NFL. I can evaluate college tape. I can measure their size and athleticism against norms, but you have no idea how a person in their in their 20s is going to respond to instantly becoming a millionaire and having more free time than they've ever had in their entire life. I wouldn't
respond well to that.
Well, and then there's the whole other factor where how much turnover is there in the NFL when it comes to coaching staffs? I mean, what friggin' 9 coaches this year alone? I mean, half the league over the last 2 years has flipped with coaches.
Yeah.
And
Baker so you're telling a point in his little rant there's a point to be made there.
Yeah, 4 head coaches, 4 offense coordinators.
So it's a little bit out of my hands. You know what I mean? Like I can tell you what I think this player can be. That's rooted in good process and extensive film research and studying everything I can about the player. But you tell me how somebody's going to respond to those variables. It's impossible to know.
Yeah. You put the same talent, the same player into Buffalo circumstance last year or with Urban Meyer in Jacksonville last year. That exact same talent is not going to turn out the same.
Right.
All right. 100%. Real quick, before we get into this, I'm going to hit you with back-to-backs here, but sort of speaking on this idea of how some of those things, those absolutes come to be, being with the Draft Network and having this daily podcast that sways a lot of how Bills fans think. I think you have a following with your takes and your analysis that become a part of the narrative. How do you feel in terms of the responsibility of creating buzz for players with the platform you guys have at the Draft Network, where if you guys are all high on a guy, he's going to continuously be on these big boards early in drafts, or maybe if you're too low, what's that responsibility feel like? And how seriously is that something you guys talk about day in and day out, and what the work you put out?
It's a really good question. I think about that a lot, to be honest with you. And I think that's why I don't find myself to be super hot takey or hyperbolic, whatever that word is,
hyperbolic
about a lot of things. I try to be very even keeled and level headed, because I do understand that I have an opportunity to influence people. And here's what I can promise people. First of all, that I'm not going to be right about everything. I've been wrong plenty of times. I'm going to be wrong plenty more times.
We won't tell your wife, but
she's aware of she knows better than anyone.
Yeah.
But I also want everybody to know that everything that I say is intentional, and it's rooted in good process. I don't just make stuff up. I never have been that guy. I don't operate off of emotion. I do come from a well-researched position. And so anything that you hear from me, I hope everyone understands is rooted in that, even though I'm going to get stuff wrong all the time.
Yeah. All right, cool. So let's get into this. I've seen a bunch of your mocks. I've listened to a bunch of your podcasts. We're rolling into night one. You've had a couple drinks at the draft. You're sitting back, Brandon Beane's ready to pick. What is your ideal scenario, your dream scenario when Joe Marino is thinking about exactly what he wants out of this draft after all this that you've watched? What is your dream scenario where the Bills walk away with exactly what you want at 25?
We know each other well enough at this point where I can turn a question into a question, and I'll get to you. I'll answer that at some point here, but I want to pin this back on you guys because Aaron, you just painted a picture for me that makes me think about how I feel when the Bills are on the clock.
Yeah.
Like, what's that like for you? Because for me, when the Bills are on the clock, and for the last since 2016, I've done some type of live broadcast covering the draft, and so I've had to kind of like compartmentalize a little bit,
right?
Knowing that like when the Bills are on the clock. But there is just this unbelievable anxiousness that I get, like that I normally don't. Like, it could be a 2-minute drill to win the game, and the Bills have the ball, and I'm more nervous about whatever that card is going to have on it when the Bills are on the clock. I don't know if you guys have that. Like, well, how do you guys feel when the Bills are on the clock and they're about to make their first round pick?
Hey, Greg, you can go ahead.
So I've had a couple different ones. I've had some live go in, and it's the same anxiety. And last year was there in person and got invited to go down in the room and had cameras on me on ESPN and NFL Network and everything, and a group of people, but it was like 8 of us that were on TV as the pick was going to happen. I was very conscious of not having a negative emotional response, no matter who the name was. I didn't want to be that guy on national TV. So I start not too far away, like 6 to 8 picks away. I create my list and go through. Okay, here's who I want. Okay, we still got 5 of them left. Okay, there's still 4 of the guys left. And last year, Newsome was going, and like all the guys that we were looking for. And I got them. Okay, here's the 4 guys. Here's the 5 guys I still wanted. And Rousseau was like 5th for me out of the 5 guys. I was like, all right. And so as it happened, I was like, okay, yeah, all right, I guess. Okay. And then you work your head around it and everything. But I start narrowing my list down as it goes, and then get it. Okay, as long as it's one of these guys, I'll be on board. And then, you go from there.
Yeah. For me, I feel like now that the Bills are good and they're picking in those mid to late 20s picks, it's totally changed the game for me. When it was a top 15 pick, it's a little bit more like, hey, the franchise is dependent on this getting right and finally righting this ship. So all those drought drafts, I was on the edge of my seat. Like, this guy has to be the guy that turns the franchise around or gets them in that position, where now, since Josh Allen draft, and that I was pissed. I was one of those guys that probably had a terrible comment in that sect. I was pissed, but it ended up being the greatest pick. And now, since then, though, picking in the late 20s, I'm much more relaxed when it comes. Like, similar to Greg, I'll have that list of, hey, I'll be happy if we get these guys, but really I'm going to sign up for whatever. I wasn't on board with Rousseau at the pick. I was like, okay, I don't get it, but sure, let's do it. And I love the guy. Like, this is perfect. So I'm much more cool and relaxed than I've been throughout the drought years. Now, that being a playoff caliber team and not relying on this guy to set the franchise forward, I think gives me a little bit of that cushion.
Hear you. All right. So your question was my dream scenario at 25. To me, and we want to be realistic with this, right? That's kind of the point.
Sauce Gardner, 25.
Yeah. Yes. Perfect. And these might be a little bit of a stretch.
We can get a little loose.
Little bit of a stretch.
Yeah.
It's Andrew Booth or Jamison Williams. Booth, the corner from Clemson, Williams from Alabama. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that dreams are made of if one of those guys get there, because I feel like they're individually exactly what the offense needs and exactly what the defense needs, where Jamison Williams is this unbelievable field stretcher with world-class speed and top-tier route running ability. Let me say something about speed at wide receiver. If I were to give you the fastest 10 receivers in the history of the NFL scouting combine, you're not going to see a list of really good NFL players. Okay. Right. That's because speed only matters if you can control your speed and turn it into good route running, and you have hands and ball skills for it to matter, right? Can you carry that speed to the football, or do you have to get weird and alter your pace because you don't know how to run routes with good tempo. All right.
Marquise Goodwin, John
Ross.
John
Ross, if not a good football player. Okay. So you need route running to go with it and ball skills. And Jamison Williams has that. And he's unbelievable after the catch. So this is the take the top off the defense guy that I just dream about for Josh Allen. And not only does he give you that field stretching ability, but he's unbelievable after the catch. So I think you add exactly that missing skill set from the wide receiver core. And then Andrew Booth out of Clemson, I fell in love with him back in May. He was one of the first players that I watched. And he only had played 400 snaps when I evaluated him going into the season. But I was all in. I pushed my chips in. I said, I think this guy has a chance to be one of the best corners in this draft. And he went out and turned those 400 snaps that I watched in 2020 and started all season long in 2021 as the guy for Clemson in the secondary. And he was phenomenal. I think he gives you a balanced skill set as a man corner and zone corner. He's got the 31-inch arms that you're looking for. Ball skills are unbelievable. He's made some of the most ridiculous plays in the ball you'll ever see. And he's an unbelievable tackler. He wants to play through contact. He's going to make your run defense better because he'll defend the D gap. He's an elite competitor. He doesn't want to give anyone an inch. And so he's one of those players that you just watch and you say, I want that guy on my team. And so if I feel that way, I'd like to think that somebody in the NFL does, and he wouldn't get to 25, but maybe the fact that he's got a couple of injuries right now that are going to keep him from testing could help the Bills' cause for him getting to 25. But corners that can cover like he does with ball skills that are physical, with his athletic profile and size, I don't know how he gets to 25, but if he does, I'm turning in the card real quick.
Yeah.
Love it. And I'd be excited to see. And I think he's one of those guys that would be one of the high RAS score guys if he had done the testing, and people don't realize what a good athlete he is. So flipping that around, going to the other end of the spectrum, who's a player that maybe Bills Mafia may not be initially excited about? Maybe a Gregory Rousseau is a good example for last year, that there won't be an initial, universal response, but better brace themselves for at 25 as you see a realistic possibility.
I kind of struggled with this question, but I do have two names that I want to bring up here that maybe are a little bit off the radar, aren't commonly seen in mock drafts, but I think when you get to that bottom 25% of the first round, which is exactly where the Bills are picking, things get a little bit strange, right? That's where you see the Jordan Brookses and the Kenneth Murrays and the LJ Colliers, those types of players. They get picked, the Peyton Turners, right? This stuff happens every single year. So the two players that come to mind are both players that I think fall in line with some of the tendencies that Brandon Beane has had in picking players in terms of, size, athleticism, raw, underdeveloped, high ceiling players that have transitioned from other spots, right? The first one, I got one player on offense, one player on defense. The first player is Tyler Smith out of Tulsa. And he is a joy to watch on tape. He's one of the most tenacious football players I've ever seen. He wants to embarrass people, right? Put them on their back. He doesn't care if your mom, your girlfriend, your family's in the stands watching you. He wants to destroy you, okay? And I love that about him. He's a terrific athlete. He's got unbelievable size and athleticism. He's also got major technique flaws in terms of handwork and footwork, all right? He's a complete project from that perspective, but he's also one of those guys that has that type of temperament and physical skill set that I think any offensive line coach is going to be standing on a table begging their general manager to give him this player. All right. And so for the Bills, I don't know that there's a starting spot right now available on this offensive line, but you look beyond this season, particularly at guard, where I think Tyler Smith projects best to the NFL. And you think about Roger Saffold, who's probably a one-year thing, and he even had issues last year in Tennessee finishing games right with that shoulder thing. Yeah. So the Bills need to have another guard that's ready to go, and maybe that's Ike Bucker, maybe that's Cody Ford, right? Greg Mans. They have some options, but the guy that could be your long-term starter that gives you a really high ceiling to develop into is Tyler Smith, where I think, think about Kelechi Osemele and that type of player. I think he can be that. So he's the offensive player that I would bring up, and not that you asked me for an offensive and a defensive player, but I want to give you one for both sides of the ball. On the defensive side of the football, oh, by the way, Tyler Smith, if I'm not mistaken, converted defensive tackle, right? So that kind of checks all the boxes, right? The traitsy conversion, upward mobility, small school, all that stuff. On defense, the player is Tariq Woolen out of UTSA. Cornerback, 6'4", 34-inch arms, 4.2 speed. I mean, unbelievable size and athleticism. He's also unbelievably raw, and that's because he's only been playing corner for 2 years. So he goes to UTSA to play receiver. He's a receiver for 3 seasons. Coaching staff approaches him in 2019 about switching over to cornerback.
Says, hey, Tariq, you can't catch.
I was going to say, is it one of those classic we hear I can't catch?
Usually that's the case, but he went over, he embraces the transition. 2-year starter for UTSA. He is part of the first ever conference championship team in UTSA program history. Goes to the combine, unbelievable historic performance there. He did well for himself at the Senior Bowl. And so when you think about upward mobility, position switch, unbelievable traits, he's got a presence about him. He's got really high football character. I've actually had a chance to spend some time with him. He was on Draft Dudes, and we hung out at the combine, when he was done with his stuff. And so I think that he does have that type of DNA that Sean McDermott's looking for. So Tyler Smith, Tariq Woolen, those are the, hey, don't say I didn't warn you if these guys are the pick at 25.
Yeah. Well, Eric asked a question here that lines up with that about how much that comes into play, the meeting a guy, getting a sense for his character, and how hard that is maybe on the other side of that when those kind of topics come up that there's something you can't see on the film, but that it's going to be a factor.
Well, I think we've been really lucky in the last couple of years to form some relationships with players and get good opportunities to spend time with them, whether it's during the season, Shrine Bowl, Senior Bowl, Combine, Pro Days. Like that stuff has happened for us more and more. And I think we're getting a better look into the character of guys. And that's been very, very helpful in our process. And so, I think we're generally going to gravitate towards those players that we've had those encounters with. And we have some really cool content that I can't really talk about that's coming out in the next few weeks. That's going to highlight a lot of exactly what I just said. And when it comes out, you'll know, oh yeah, that's what Joe was talking about. But that helps us, right? We wish we can have that same level of information and exposures to every player, but we can't. But the ones that we do, it certainly helps me to buy in more because I know that's what teams are looking for, right? We can watch these guys all day long play football, but these are human beings that you want to bring into your locker room and understand what they're going to offer and how they're going to blend in with your organization and how they're going to adapt to the culture. And, those are things that teams are looking for just as much as they are what they can do on the field.
So, Joe, who is a player that you've come around on that initially in this process that you weren't high on and you've come around after all the work you've put in?
I want to answer this, but it's not necessarily a target for the Buffalo Bills, right?
Okay.
This isn't going to be my coming out party on Breece Hall or Jordan Davis. All right. That's not what's going to happen. But in terms of a player that I just was lukewarm on that have come around to this year, it's wide receiver Drake London out of USC, where I did his, we do a little cross check. I kind of outlined our process, but we do a little mini cross check at the end of summer where you have a couple of weeks to go back and watch some of the top players across the country, right? And so Drake London was on my list of guys that I got to, and I thought to myself, yeah, I like the size, I like the hands, I like the ball skills, but I'm nervous that this is like a big slot type player. And you guys may recall a lot of the things that I said about Isaiah Hodgins, where I talk really highly about his route running. I talk very highly about his hands, but I wasn't sure what type of athlete he was. I wasn't sure if he could play through contact. I wasn't sure that he was a player that can align at different spots. That's not a big slot. And I had the same questions about Drake London entering the season. Well, Drake London more than answered those questions. He played a ton of outside receiver. The passing game was literally funneled through him. I think there's a lot of games where he had like 20 targets. He catch like 18 of them, right? Like he proved that he can be that dude and play on the perimeter and play in the slot and uncover and play through contact and those types of things. So Drake London went from a guy that I was like, I don't see it, to, okay, I think this is a first-round receiver. Not necessarily a player I'd love for the Bills. I would hope for a different type of skill set, but a player that I think somebody should pick in the first round if they need that type of player.
So you already touched on this one a little bit in the, guys you were low on in the cross-check process, but who are some guys that you see a lot of buzz, a lot of, people talking very highly of, and you just don't see it in the same range? Again, it doesn't mean you hate the player, you wouldn't draft them no matter what, but you're just not aligned with the same range that you see other people grading them.
I think it's Treylon Burks out of Arkansas, wide receiver. I think a lot of people really like Treylon Burks, and his hype got a little bit out of control when people started to make the Debo. And look,
I feel like you're preaching to me right now on that.
I understand why people brought that up, because when you watch Arkansas play, it's a lot of force feeding Treylon Burks the ball with kind of like dump and run touches and some handoffs, and he gets chances in the return game. Like he's that player on the team that they knew is their best player, and they want to just get him the ball however they can.
Right.
Well, the problem with Treylon Burks, if you watch the tape, is he just doesn't win routes.
Yeah.
And as a receiver, I'm sorry, like your primary function is to win routes, get open, and then you have to catch the football. And I think he can develop as a route runner, but you can't watch Arkansas tape and tell me that this is a player that understands route pacing, timing, rhythm, setting up breaks, getting in and out of breaks. It's just not what he does. Now, he'll win down the field. You can throw it up to him on a vertical shot. He's got ball skills and size. He'll win in that capacity. You can dump and run with him, and he can create. But I need wide receivers that can win routes. And so for Treylon Burks, he's got a long road ahead of him. And for some teams, I'd like him more than others. Like if you're a team like the Detroit Lions, that's probably not even a good answer. If you're one of those teams that like needs a guy that to come in and be like your starting X receiver that's going to get 100+ targets, don't do that to Treylon Burks. He's not ready to be that. But honestly, I like him for teams that are more established, where if you're looking for an X factor, Tennessee Titans, in some ways the Bills, although he wouldn't be crazy about it, those are the teams that I'd like for Treylon Burks. For the teams that just like have to get a dude at receiver, yeah, I think you'd be missing the mark on Treylon Burks. So he's that guy that I see a lot of people love that I just can't get around. I think he's a fine end of the second round target, but in my world, I wouldn't touch him in the first round. And there's other players. I mean, I'm not super high on Breece Hall. I think that's well stated. I think he's a player that if you want receiving upside, you want that second level vision, that ability in space, like he's really good, but I just don't trust the first level vision and the contact balance. So I have questions about Breece Hall. I'd still pick him on day 2. And the other player, as you guys know, Jordan Davis. I'm not in on Jordan Davis.
Well, I don't think the Bills are at this point anymore either. So that's good.
We've signed so many defensive tackles. I'm pretty sure
that's a fight you don't have to fight the rest of it. I'm sure you're excited to see them take care of that position and know that wasn't a fight you were going to have all.
You know what's funny though? I'll tell on myself right here. The last time I did this, it was with T. Higgins. Remember this? I was like, I'm all the way out on T. Higgins, and so they took care of it. They traded for Diggs, right?
Right.
But T. Higgins has turned out to be a really good player for the Cincinnati Bengals, but I would concede that was a really good spot for him with a quarterback that would use his skill set, where if he was in Buffalo, I think we'd be talking about T. Higgins like we do Gabriel Davis. I think he'd be that type of player in this offense. So I think he went to the right spot.
Yeah, no, for sure. And now, so my last one for you is who is everyone's favorite day 3 mock pick that you're seeing, who is for sure going to be a day 2 guy and everyone just doesn't know it yet?
Man, I've got 4.
All right.
Of these for you.
You're breaking some hearts tonight.
Yeah, I want everyone to be having the right expectation. Matt Araiza, the punt god from San Diego State. I know it's crazy to talk about day 2 punters. He's that type of guy, right? Like he's the type of guy that's going to go in the 3rd round. Brian Angerer, Todd Sauerbrunn, like those are the players that have also went day 2. Where I think if you want Matt Araiza, you got to pick him in the 3rd round. And there are a lot of teams out there that want punters, right? Like the Bills aren't the only team with a punter issue out there. So which one is going to pull the trigger on, in the late 3rd round? Because I think that's what's going to happen. If you think you're getting Matt Araiza in the 5th round, like it's just not going to happen. Learn about Jordan Stout and the punter from Georgia, like Stonehouse. Yeah. If you want to pick a punter in the 5th round, there's going to be guys, but you ain't getting Araiza. Josh Williams, cornerback from Fayetteville State. I think he's a top 100 player. Guys that are physical, long, athletic, ball skills, they go early at corner. I don't think he gets to the 4th round if that's a player people are hoping for. Cam Taylor-Britt out of Nebraska. Might be a second rounder. Yeah, like I mean, like the dream is like, okay, let's pass on corner because we can get Cam Taylor-Britt in the 3rd round.
I think this is one of those instances where the Draft Network might be doing a disservice to fans and their expectations because he's there every time.
You know what's funny though is we love Cam Taylor-Britt is one of our brand guys. We love him. Like
I love him. Yeah.
I did some really cool like exclusive content with him that people will see eventually. Got to meet his family. Like he is awesome, and he's like fast. He's physical. he's like a football character guy through and through. Like, yeah, maybe we need to bump him up on the predictive board there. He's a player that I would not, if you think you're getting him in the 4th round, no way. I think you'd be lucky late 3rd round. One other guy, excuse me, Khalil Shakir out of Boise State. I think he's a guy that more and more people are falling in love with as they watch his tape, and he's another high football character guy, versatile player. I don't think he's a guy you can count on being there for you in the 4th round.
So one last one before we get to the fun part here. You've talked about the positive end of it with the Tariq Woolen. You talked about it with Tyler Smith. Who is a kind of super toolsy project guy that you see everybody else projecting what they think it's going to turn into that you don't think it's going to translate?
I think there's 2. Jordan Davis is a player. I would pick Jordan Davis in the 2nd round. I would. But there's just other defensive tackles I'd prefer. I like Travis Jones more than Jordan Davis. And we've talked about this a lot. Conditioning, weight management, pass rush ability. I don't think he checks those boxes at all. And so, I think he's going to go in the top 15 picks, but it wouldn't be me pulling the trigger. Because what did they say? The best indicator of future behavior is past behavior. And I don't like what that says for Jordan Davis, especially when we layer in the whole thing we talked about, being in the early 20s, becoming an instant millionaire, having all the free time in the world. No.
Albert Hainsworth.
Marcel Darius.
Yeah, Marcel Darius. Literally in both.
Well, at least those guys got a second contract.
Correct. Those guys actually had awesome flashes early.
They did.
And then
they earned those deals, and then they said, yeah, I'm good. The other player, and I guess I teased this earlier, is Christian Harris out of Alabama, where he's got great size. He's got great speed. If I'm not mistaken, like a 4.4 40-yard dash. But watch him play. This guy's lost in coverage. I don't think he understands how to leverage blocks and fit the run and play downhill. He's aggressive. He's physical. He's athletic. But I think he's a dog chasing cars out there. And especially the coverage stuff. If you're going to be a hit and run type linebacker that profiles as a space player, well, then you got to be a good space player. You got to be able to cover. I just don't see it with Christian Harris out of Alabama.
So as we switch into our final stretch here, we will go through a full 7-round mock simulation. No trades. We're going to turn off the trade option. Joe, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. We're going to use a platform called the Draft Network.
Oh, wow.
I don't think you've ever done a
Don't
simulation.
worry. We'll walk you through it.
We'll walk you through on how it works.
Thank you.
So we're going to go through. Aaron and I will be the Malik Boyds and the Brian Gaines of the group. You will be our GM and our Brandon Bean, and that we will go through and make a selection in each round to be able to take us through and prepare everything that we have to see for it. So for those listening, we will try to describe what's taking place, but we're logging in now to the Draft Network mock draft simulator, which we strongly recommend. It's a ton of fun to play with. Joe, when I pick the Bills, do you prefer that I leave it as the predictive board or the player rankings overall?
Do the predictive board. I think, we purposely set that up to sync up with the simulator and, with the algorithm and stuff like that. It's the most, I think this will give us the realistic view.
So we'll let it run here. Obviously, many of the standard names going early. We'll see who makes it, and then you can let us know who you like.
13.
Jameson. Oh, the Packers, they killed us.
Oh, 20. Make it to 20.
There's no way they're going to give Aaron Rodgers
this group here, obviously having the Packers and the Patriots both have very similar needs to the Bills. Do you think there's any possibility that 20 or 19 are trade targets to jump ahead of them?
It's a good question. You feel like New Orleans was pretty intentional about being where they are with the trade that they made with the Eagles. But Pittsburgh, if Pittsburgh loves a quarterback, I think they'll sit there and pick them. But that could be a spot to get ahead of. But
is this the draft to love a quarterback though?
Yeah.
No, but that doesn't stop the NFL from drafting quarterbacks, man. I think that's one of the lost storylines of this draft, where everyone's crapping on this quarterback class, and I don't love it either.
There's still going to be 3 of them going.
I think there's at least 2 that goes in the top 10, and I think you get 3 first-rounders, if not 4. That's just what the NFL does. Blaine Gabbert, Blake Bortles was the number 3 pick. Christian Ponder,
Jake Locker.
Christian Ponder. The NFL does this. Why are we going to act like they're not going to do it this year?
For sure.
They're going to.
All right. Where do you want us to
talent on the board right now, though?
Linderbaum, Kenya Green, Dotson, Olave, Kyrie Elam.
Jackson
Yeah,
Hill,
this
your
is-
boy Treylon Burks. We can.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's pick all the players I just said.
I'll tell you right now. So I've been doing the weeklies with Moran. Obviously, I do a lot. I'm having a hard time with Olave being there, and I try not to pick the same thing over and over again. But I have a hard time with him not being it for me, the top player there. Obviously, Devin Lloyd is probably I've got a higher grade on him. But then you're getting in the conversation. Okay, like you're taking him now. That shoe has to drop with Tremaine. You're doing something with him, and I'm having trouble taking that step.
So this is one of those scenarios where I think the offensive tackles and quarterbacks going before 25 helped get Chris Olave to this point. So you had, is that going to be 3 quarterbacks that went?
Yeah, Pickett going
4.
Yeah, Pickett and Ritter, Bernard Raymond.
Raymond going helps a ton. Your first receiver doesn't come off the board to 11. Even the corner run, like the corner run helped the Bills be in a spot here to pick Chris Olave.
Yeah.
So, like, to me, that's the very obvious choice right here.
I have a tough time not doing it.
Yeah. I mean, he's well, and you talk about, someone that could then transition and be not have to be that number one, like you talked about with Treylon Burks, but has the skill set to be
just
a
fit
guy
into
later
the room
on.
nicely.
Just perfect fit with everything they have.
If Jamison Williams wasn't in this class, this is the best vertical receiver in the draft. And so just think about what a player like this that is dynamic down the field with exceptional hands and ball skills will do for your spacing, right? He's going to change the math because he is a player that commands attention down the field. And that opens up a world of possibility for Stephon Diggs and Jamison Crowder and Gabe Davis and the tight ends and all of those guys. Yeah, like this is the guy that changes your spacing and makes teams pay. Like if you want to change the math in terms of being aggressive with flooding coverage lanes, all right, well, here's a guy that's going to push your coverage vertically, and the Bills can do a lot underneath. So I think that type of player would really just be a major impact to the Bills on offense.
Yeah,
absolutely.
You get here into the second round, and this is one of my fears for people that maybe aren't as high Cam Taylor-Britt like we are, where you get to that late second round and you get a run on corners that could very well come true. Where
Kyler Gordon goes, Elam goes.
Elam was gone.
McCreary goes.
McCreary's gone.
Woolen goes.
Woolen's off the board. Yep.
So who are sorted by corners to see? Yeah, like. This is
it's a weird void, right? It's a weird spot. If there is a run like that, you really fall into a weird window of you're reaching quite a bit here now,
right?
Or do you sit back and wait for that Cam Taylor-Britt to not come true?
Here's the challenge that I have. You could draft one of those corners right now, and I think realistically, looking at Alontae Taylor, looking at Cam Taylor-Britt, I think they can start for you in week 1. Whereas I can sit here and tell you all about Dylan Parham and how I think he can start for you in 2023 at offensive line. I could talk about our running back, Isaiah Spiller's on the board, who I'd love to pick.
Right.
But I think I can get a lot of what that running back would bring later. I don't know that I can wait for a corner that I think can realistically start for my football team. And that's hard for me because he's not the best player on the board. Like predictively, I think the Bills would look at a Chad Muma in this spot out of Wyoming. I think predictively, Isaiah Spiller and Breece Hall would be in play. Dylan Parham would be in play. And that is probably, like, honestly, that's the smart thing to do here. You're getting better talent. You're just not getting it at your biggest need.
Yeah.
So foiling that's difficult.
Yeah.
Well, and you look at the way that this fell, I do think maybe more so than 25. I think trading up from 57 is definitely a possibility. And he's done that so many times on day 2 that he's made those small moves that if you saw a guy like Tariq Woolen getting to the late 40s here, I think that's where he calls Minnesota, Washington, Chicago.
Yeah, you're getting one of those guys.
Yeah, right? One of those guys, whoever he likes out of McCreary or Woolen, you're getting to a point there where, hey, we need to be able to move up here and be able to snag him rather than just waiting for him to fall. But with this scenario, do you take the slight reach for a cornerback that you think can still play, or do you take the BPA?
Let me say one other thing here. And Greg, I think you may deserve credit for this, but let's assume that Chris Olave wasn't there at 25, which I think is a fairly safe assumption.
Yeah.
I think that you're looking at a scenario where it makes a lot of sense to trade back and then up, right?
Yep.
I think I saw a tweet from you on that.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that. I people ask in the chat about, hey, how many spots do we have for rookies? Everybody can argue, is it 5, 6, 7? Is in there? It's probably not 8, and it certainly isn't 9. Trade down. And you have these people send mocks with 11 and 12 rookies. Yeah. There just isn't that possibility. But trading back to build up assets to then trade forward, and you ideally end up with 4 or 5 picks between 40 and 130. All of a sudden now those are all impact spots that can all make the roster, and then maybe 1 extra pick, and you end up with 6 total because you use the ammo to move back up from 57, up from 89, up from 130, and then all of a sudden you're ending up with more impact players that you're targeting to go get.
Who are some players though that you need to be on the board to think teams are going to come up to 25? Is it quarterbacks? Is it the run not happening and some quarterbacks being there and you want to get that 5th-year option? Is Olave one of those guys that teams are going to come up for? I don't know. Jameson Williams maybe. But I feel like the guys that are going to fall there are also guys you want to take.
The one area I think the Bills have in their favor this year is 3 or 4 of the key premium positions are not major needs for the Bills. Last year we saw the huge run at defensive end at the end of the first round because people wanted that 5th-year option. Obviously quarterback, also offensive tackle. So those are ones where if there is teams that want to go up, that those are spots you really get value for that 5th-year option. That if somebody targets an edge, even a D tackle like Jordan Davis, making it to 25 and somebody falling in love with him and wanting to move back, those are at least the Bills have that benefit that now corner and wide receiver are still also premium positions, that could be the reason not to. But if the cornerbacks and wide receivers go, which is very much rumored, now you have reason to say, hey, you guys want these tackles, D tackles, defensive ends, quarterbacks, come get it. We'll be happy to drop the 36 and pick up an extra one or whatever it might be.
Yep. I think you're exactly right. The WR Mafias of the world being on the board, George Karlaftis. Those are the players you want to see on the board at 25 if you want to kind of do this backing up. All right,
but we didn't do that. So what do we got to do?
I got to make a pick here. I'm going to blend my personal preferences with predictive, and I think a player that the Bills are really going to love is Dylan Parham from Memphis. We're going to make him the pick here, and I think he's a guy that gives you flexibility. He played 3. That's a good report there. You should read that. That he can play both guard spots and center. He's even played some tackle at Memphis. He's one of my favorite stories. He went to high school. He played linebacker and tight end in high school. He was also a basketball player and on the track and field team. And he was a sprinter and a jumper on the track and field team. Yeah. So he goes to Memphis and he's there to play tight end. And in 2018, he switches over to offensive line and he becomes a 4-year starter, an impact player. And he's just this really nice blend of size, athleticism, technique, power. I compare him to Shaq Mason, right? I think he's got that type of ability. So we talk about kind of getting ahead of the need at guard. And let's be honest, like there's been a lot of miscalculations at guard for the Bills.
Yeah.
Like you can finally have a cost control player here that can pair with Ryan Bates to give you what you need at that position. So I think
from a draft miss standpoint, Cody Ford's probably Bean's biggest miss from a value return standpoint.
Right.
I think it's been the biggest disservice Bean has done to this roster, and specifically to Mitch Morse of what they put at guard around him. They've got to get it fixed. Yeah, for sure. So we take Cam Taylor-Britt here, right? And then we just keep moving along this draft. Right?
Well, so beyond Cam Taylor-Britt, you talked about the move from the guy that everybody assumes. Is there a case for, I've heard a lot of buzz around Martin Emerson, and obviously you talked about Josh Williams. Is there a case there for either of those two? Obviously, I know there's a lot of McDermott DNA and Taylor-Britt. Is that a debate here in this spot?
Well, if this was how the board really was, I think you turn in the card for Cam Taylor-Britt. If you want to operate in a world where he's not available, I think the Bills will like Josh Williams quite a bit. I think they'd love Kobe Bryant from Cincinnati, who
I love Kobe Bryant. Yeah,
he's exactly the type of player I can see the Bills wanting to get. I think they're going to – is that Troy Anderson, linebacker from Montana State? I think they're going to love him too.
Yeah.
And, I mean, James Cook, a player that I think they had Cook in for a 30 visit, if I'm not mistaken.
They did.
You want to get your your J.D. McKissick, here he is. I mean, this guy's unbelievable with his ability to catch the football and lined up, flexed, and run routes and win down the field as well.
You like JoJo Doman, Nebraska? Cam's
I do.
Running
I
buddy?
do. Yeah. Funny story about JoJo. Well, I'm not going to say it. I do like JoJo Doman. Let's see here. So there's corners that I like.
But yeah,
we're pretending Cam's
we should. No, we should. I think that it's still the right pick that in this spot. And again, it's these things happen every year. That there's different spots, and there is enough. It's not like there's crazy people going ahead of him in the other spots. There's other talent that can push that down with such a deep, especially such a deep wide receiver class.
And just because I know the way that some of these go, like I know if you want to make a double dip, there's going to be some double dip cornerback opportunities, which I love the concept of double dipping in this draft. I like the depth of this draft. You'd have a hard time. I might throw a riot in a draft room if Cam Taylor-Britt was here and we have that need and he checks all the boxes for a guy like me. I'd be fighting you guys to not turn that card in.
You mean like Creed Humphrey last year when I lost my mind?
Yeah.
Like he checked every single box of the McDermott DNA and was there at the pick. And instead we double dipped a defensive end that one.
Right.
I literally lost my mind.
Seriously, what happened there? Like
I lost my mind. I melted down. I melted down. Luckily I was with my mom and my nephews at the time. They were staying in my house. So I couldn't actually throw a fit, but I was just seething with anger.
That'll be me
at the moment.
That'll be me fighting.
So okay, let's take Cam Taylor-Britt. It's the right pick. It's what's there. And let's see what this brings us to going into pick 4. And this is a sneaky one because Brandon Beane has been a magician with 4th round picks, whether it's Taron Johnson or Gabe Davis using the pick or using the ammo to be able to get yourself a Stephon Diggs or whatever it might be.
Or Dawson Knox, right? Didn't he trade a couple of 4th round picks to move up for Dawson?
Moving up to get Dawson Knox. Anything that involves the 4th round pick is magic for Mr. Brandon Beane. And here, like you said, I do think this is probably the fringe of best case scenario of where Matt Araiza is. My prediction has been he goes between the Bills pick of 89 and 130. He was the guy that I think we all wake up Saturday morning and hear blah, 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 traded to pick 106 because they're going to lead off day 3. And the first pick is going to be Matt Araiza of day 3, leading off the 4th round. And you also some hot buzz names right here at the end of right before the pick: Khalil Shakir, Jelani Woods, Alec Pierce, Wan'Dale Robinson. So those are some real buzzy names around the mock drafts that get thrown around. So we've now hit in this spot. We'll recap a little bit. At pick 25, we took Chris Olave, wide receiver from Ohio State. At 57, we took Dylan Parham, guard from Memphis. At 89, we took Cam Taylor-Britt, cornerback from Nebraska. So we've really checked, in most people's opinion, the 3 top needs that are there with a match of best player available. It kind of opens you up. Joe, what do you want us to look at of the positions that are here?
I'm thinking a lot about a running back here.
I like running back here. What do you think on White?
I really like Rachaad White.
Yeah, I do too. Right here.
Me too.
Yeah,
Me too. He's a nice blend of size. He's got explosiveness, pass catching ability. He's a player that I think would give the Bills a lot of what they're looking for in terms of a complementary type player, but also with size and some speed and some pass catching ability. I think he'd be a really strong selection at this point. And this is that guy. Like, I love Pierre Strong a little bit later. Jerome Ford's a player that I like, but I think, man, Pierre's so good. He's over 7 yards a carry for his career, over 4 yards after contact for his career. He's carried the football a ton, over 700 touches at the college level. But Rachaad White, man, he's definitely popping here. I don't like any of these linebackers.
I know the Bills had that DeMarco Jackson in for a visit. Were you able to do any work on him?
Don't know a thing about him. I'm not afraid to admit it. I haven't watched DeMarco Jackson.
Another guy, that Weidermeyer is a guy that was came in for a visit.
We already went wide receiver here, but in the scenario where we didn't, where are you on Velus Jones Jr. and his age? I know that's
he's an older guy. Yeah. I mean, if you want speed and return ability, he checks that box.
Probably pretty limited to just be that. gadget
No,
in return?
I mean, it's hard because if you watch Tennessee like I have, I mean, that passing offense has been tough to watch. And like I thought he was their third best receiver this past year.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Like I think he's a player that I think kind of in a niche role is going to be the best way.
I feel like he'd be a slight upgrade to Isaiah McKenzie. Like, and then that would be your Isaiah McKenzie. And then you wouldn't have to have one roster spot for two jobs. You would give him the return job and that gadget kind of guy.
Yeah, I'm on board with that. Yeah.
But you think White is the pick here, or any other positions you want to check before we make the selection?
No, this would be the player. This is the player I would pick here. I could wait on a running back, but this is the guy that I think has starter traits. Like if you wanted to let Devin Singletary walk, and you feel like Rachaad White plus something else, we do.
Yeah, he can be the complement. That's ideally how you layer this going forward. Is they're the complement year one, then they take over year two, and then in 2 years from now you do it again, and just rinse and repeat. And that you keep signing these fringe guys, the Matt Breidas, the Duke Johnsons, and you hope you eventually hit on one. But then you go from there. And here, obviously,
I like how this played out
with the board having Araiza fall again. That's certainly,
so I'll let you in on a hint. Matt Araiza is never going to get drafted unless you pick him, because we don't have punter as a team need for any of the teams. So he's just not going to get drafted.
He just hangs out there.
Right.
So we're assuming he's gone. We're just
we should operate under the assumption that he's not there.
That's okay. I like Cam Jurgens being
right
here. So I like Smith being right there.
So now let's use Jurgens as a good example, because I've heard a couple people throw around center only, and then I've heard some people throw around the Eric Wood idea of long term he's probably a center but could play guard. Where do you fall on that? Does Jurgens have versatility in your mind?
I don't think so. I think he's a center only. And the reason that you say somebody's a center only is because you don't feel comfortable with guys stacked right on top of them, right? You want him to kind of function as a help blocker, both in the run and pass game, and you want to use their range on some of the longer pulls and climbs to the second level, where I just don't think that Jurgens has the functional strength to be able to handle bigger interior defensive linemen stacked on top of him. I think he could be a reasonable starter in his own scheme, but I don't think he offers that positional flexibility.
Interesting. What about Lacita Smith?
I like Lacita Smith, tight end, former tight end, so you get the position switch there. Short arms, that's kind of the thing with him, but I think he's a good power player. I think he's got good temperament. I think he's got pretty good balance. And I think this is the type of guy that you say, oh, wow, if we're going to find a guy with starter traits on the interior offensive line in the middle rounds, I think you can get that done in Lacita Smith.
So I know overall some of the spots that we haven't touched on yet. So again, we've hit wide receiver, interior offensive line, cornerback, running back. So some of the other spots that come up, linebacker, any names that
we got to get that Tremaine replacement, or people are going to have our heads.
He could be one of those guys. What about, can you show me the tight ends? Because this is an interesting position group, because none of them are under contract beyond this year.
I
do not like Weidermeyer has the type of athletic profile that you say fail, right? He's like a 260-pound tight end that also can't block. So he can't get open. He can't block. I don't need a big guy in contested situations as a tight end. Like, he doesn't do anything for me whatsoever.
I know Eric's a Charlie Kolar guy. What are your thoughts on Kolar?
I think Charlie Kolar is very much can do everything at a reasonable level, nothing at a high level.
Okay, so which is kind of a Sweeney in your mind, like that's how I describe Tommy Sweeney. Like he's
exactly
okay at everything.
It's exactly what he is. Let's go here. There is a tight end that I like here. It's James Mitchell out of Virginia Tech. A little bit of a forgotten guy in this class because he got injured pretty early in this season. But if I'm not mistaken, my comp for him is Charles Clay, and I think that paints a really good picture in terms of stylistically how they win. And I think as a move tight end that you could play flex, you could play in line a little bit, has really intriguing route running ability and ball skills. He's a player that I like, especially at this point in the draft. If I'm not mistaken, I think I might have a 4th round valuation on him. So he's a player that I want to pick here because he's the last guy in these tight ends. Like Charlie Kolar's fine, but this guy I think has a chance to be like a legitimate tight end too.
Yeah.
Very nice. That's a strong pick there. So again, as we let it roll to the next pick here, and we'll have a quick pick early in the 6th round. We've now checked a lot of the boxes: wide receiver, interior offensive line, corner, running back, tight end. 4 on offense, only 1 on defense so far. We haven't talked much about safety. Is that something that, I know Joe Buscaglia wrote a good article kind of making a case that maybe the Bills need to be more serious about safety. And we know, obviously, Jordan Poyer fired his agent, hired Drew Rosenhaus. Yep. Maybe that escalates some of that concern. Obviously, we're not picking a Jordan Poyer replacement in the 6th round. That's not the case here.
Well, Jordan Poyer was a 7th round pick. So
believe me, I've been reminded of it a lot. That's all you got to do is just pick another 6th or 7th rounder, and you'll be totally fine.
Happens all the time.
With the guys that are here, are there some developmental guys that you think, not that they're going to turn into all pros, but that, yes, with some time in the development, maybe have starter potential in the future?
The player here, if I were to be forced to pick a safety, would be Juanyeh Thomas out of Georgia Tech. Yeah. He's got some athleticism about him, kind of an oversized guy. I mean, you can see he's a big player, 6'3",
see what we would hoped Siran Neal would become. Could he be what we hoped Siran
I think that's a really good name to bring up, because I think at minimum you have a quality special teams ace for your team. And look, you're talking about 6th round. If you get that type of returns, like depth plus special teams ability, I think that's what you would want.
How about what other spots would you want to check here, since we've been pretty fortunate to check a lot of boxes?
I guess show me linebacker so I can say that I don't like any of them.
So talk about that a little bit, in the sense that it seems to be one of the most consistent ones that falls off pretty quickly.
Right.
So if they don't make a move on day 2 at linebacker and you get past the Mumas and Troy Andersons, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of answers later at linebacker.
Correct. And that's why I think it's in play. And look, this is a new talking point for me that I've kind of had a revelation on. It'll be part of Locked On Bills tomorrow, because I do a linebacker primer along with a safety primer. And while I think the motivation for us talking linebacker really stems from the possibility of moving on from Tremaine Edmunds after the season, because at some point the Bills are going to have to make a hard decision, right? Like, I know that moving on from Levi Wallace and letting Shaq Lawson and Jordan Phillips walk, and cutting Cole Beasley and cutting Darrell Williams, like, those are moves like that matter. Those are good players.
Sure.
But we haven't seen them have like a really tough one.
Yeah.
And this roster gets more expensive every day, it seems like. And maybe the cap will just keep ballooning, and Brandon Beane will keep listening to Greg Tompsett about roster moves that can be made to create space, and everything's going to be fine. But outside of just the fact that we think that there's a chance they can move on from Tremaine Edmunds, which really
it's a bigger loss, I think, than a lot of fans. I think a lot of people just say, like, move on from this guy. He's no good.
Anybody can replace
it's a huge hole.
Which we all know is not true. But also, like, Brandon Beane picked him. He traded up for him in the 1st round. He's a 3-time team captain and a 2-time Pro Bowler, like, with rare size and athleticism. I don't think the Bills are that eager to move on from Tremaine Edmunds. Right. Here's the point that I've been trying to get to here is maybe the Bills do want to run some more 3 linebacker sets. I think about the Patriots games last year when we knew the Patriots want to run the football. You saw a lot more A.J. Klein on the field with Tremaine and Matt Milano. And I think running the football is still going to be the bread and butter for the New England Patriots. Well, you've got the Dolphins and the Jets that want to replicate Kyle Shanahan's offense, right, in their organization. So you have 3 teams in your own division that want to run the football a ton. The entire AFC North wants to run the football. You have the Colts and Titans that want to run the football. And I know that the AFC West is a little bit different, but the Raiders out there want to run the football. And you want to make those teams come to your place, right, in the playoffs to play football games. Well, they're going to come there and try to run the football because it's going to be cold and windy and snowy, right?
And so going to want to keep the ball out of Josh Allen's hands.
Yeah, exactly, right? That's another fantastic point, Greg, where teams are going to play the Bills differently because the best thing they can do is keep Josh Allen on the sideline. The best way you do that is control the clock and run the football.
And it's been the Achilles heel of a Sean McDermott defense since he's been here.
Correct.
Like, the way you attack them.
And the schedule this year, right? They played the Packers, Bears, Lions, Vikings. Those teams run the football. So I'm saying all this to say that there's a realistic chance that they do run more 3 linebacker sets. And that has stood out to me as a key talking point into why they're looking at the Chad Mumas and the Troy Andersons of the world, because they cut AJ Klein. And I'm not sitting here trying to tell you that he's a super valuable player, but he did a reasonable job filling in for Milano and Edmonds when he's had to, and he's been able to be that third linebacker on the field. And I don't know, maybe Tyrell Dodson's ready to go or Andre Smith's ready to go, but
you probably bring Klein back.
I was just going to say, or
right.
AJ Klein is that guy again instead of veteran.
Maybe you want to get younger, right, and have a cost control player for 4 years. So I think that's kind of the bigger talking points to consider, in addition to the fact that they could move on from Tremaine Edmonds when it comes to linebackers.
Okay, so in this spot now, we're looking pretty much guys who can make the roster, special teams ability. How about this? Let's take another path. Let's go with the idea that Matt Araiza has gone. He's obviously not going to be there at 185. Obviously, I'm assuming you've done extensive work on all the punters in this draft. Do you think it's actually feasible that a Stout or a Stonehouse is the pick in a spot like this?
Yes, I do. Okay. I do think absolutely.
And is that I honestly I don't think I've ever even played around.
I don't think we have.
I think
either of them are in.
Only one.
Are in the. You guys got harassed too much. You had to put Araiza in the board.
You can take up your fights with Kyle Krabs on that stuff.
Yeah, right.
I'm deflecting.
Well, so Juanyeh is still available in this scenario. Is that correct? Now, could he be? We've talked about this a little bit offline, Joe. You and I, when I'm looking at him and that tweener role, could he be a guy that could eventually play that third linebacker in the NFL? Can you put some bulk on this guy and get him more of a linebacker than a safety? Could he
I may have even written. What is the word? I may have written about that in this. If I scroll down a little bit, Greg.
Linebacker hybrid, developmental safety. Linebacker hybrid.
Who was our guy? Brian Scott.
That's a good name pull there. Yeah, Brian Scott,
dime linebacker that we ran. Former safety and just kind of converted him into a dime linebacker.
So what if we did this? Would you guys subscribe to this? Let's pick Araiza here, but let's pretend he's some other punter, right?
Okay.
Stonehouse, Stout,
punter, insert punter name.
Right.
We'll put that.
We drafted a punter. That's not Matt Araiza.
Yeah, it's actually Stout or Stonehouse, but that we had to represent him via Matt Araiza.
Man, I get it, and I just hate drafting punters. I hate the whole idea.
Well, I hate having a bad punter more than that, though, to be honest.
And I think we're at a stage now where locking up the contract control has enough value to not have to worry about it, that also has value over the 4 years versus now. Yes, of course, there's a likelihood you could hit on a nice pick here that has a position player.
Sure.
But, a lot of times we're hitting on special teams value at this point anyways, and he is special team. Like, I don't want to do it early. I don't even want to take Araiza in the 4th round where I think we'd have to would be our best case scenario.
Sure.
But a 6th rounder, I think.
No, I get it. I get it. I want to stop having to talk about punters on the post-game show, so I'll do anything to get to that part.
So I can just let it go. So Juanyeh's still there.
Let's do the Juanyeh Thomas thing here.
Yeah, there we go. Getting my guys.
That's kind of my thought. I think we could have waited and got him, and we did. So
I like it. And I think that leaves us.
And that makes it even better if the worst case scenario is another Saran Neal. Maybe Saran Neal's a tough one because I think he's a legitimate special teams ace, but a good special teams player there, I'm happy to check that box.
And now this is the point in the draft where I pick purely based on name value and get
Smoke
someone like
Monday.
Charleston Rambo or Smoke Monday. So, so help us out, Joe. What's a good, flyer 7th round? Let's assume it's not just a thank you to a former teammate like Ricky Prohl.
Right.
Like what is a scenario where there's a spot that, hey, maybe this is a guy that could make the roster. Is it a Toolsy tackle? Is it
on practice squad guy?
Yeah, maybe a guy that we could stash on the defensive line. What's a spot you could consider?
I mean, a name that pops for me is Michael Clemons out of Texas A&M. I think he's a really Toolsy football player that I don't think lasts this long.
Okay.
And so if he were to be on the board, he gives you the length that you're looking for at the position. And as much as we love this edge group that the Bills have, Von Miller, Greg Rousseau, what do we really know about AJ Epinesa and Carlos Basham?
Nothing yet.
I mean, they've had some flashes. Shaq Lawson's coming back, but as much as I'm excited about that, and it's back to where he's played his best football, This dude couldn't latch on with the Miami Dolphins, Houston Texans, and New York Jets, teams that friggin' needed him, right?
Yeah.
So
He's
I'm a little bit
good
cautious there.
rotational. I think he's like a probably above average 5th, 6th rotational defensive lineman type guy.
Right.
I think that's where fans' expectations need to be.
Yeah, I'm fine with a training camp battle that yields the best player for the rotational 4th defensive end spot that can play strong side D end or kick into 3 tech when needed, whoever that is out of Asham or Shaq Lawson. Whichever one shows it and give it, okay, good. I'm good now. Because one of them will be enough to be that. And ideally, both of them are. And it's great. And it's a problem of who's the guy to sit.
I think Epinesa is fighting for minutes.
Yeah, so there's I've half joked about it, but out of all the things that are out there, if there's a guy who still has a pocket of name and draft grade value around other GMs that maybe could be a sneaky piece that, hey, we trade up from 57, but it's not with a pick, it's with a player. And all of a sudden we hear, oh my gosh, they traded AJ Epinesa and they re-signed Jerry Hughes. Look what happened. I don't think that's absurd. Like, I don't expect it. I'm not predicting it, but I don't think that combination of, hey, we needed a sweetener to move up, and that now you have Basham and Lawson, and Jerry Hughes hasn't re-signed with anybody yet. I don't know that using Epinesa as a sweetener to move up, and of course people will. I think I literally had somebody tell me that
when he goes on to have a 20-sack season,
that it was going to be a Wyatt Teller situation. I think I literally had somebody tell me it was going to be the defensive Wyatt Teller. That's one that I think I could see.
Sure.
Let's pick Michael Clemons.
I like it. So we've put together an outstanding draft here.
About to go win a Super Bowl. Guys.
This is outstanding. So again, to recap it, Chris Olave at 25, wide receiver. Dylan Parham at guard out of Memphis at 57 in the 2nd round. 3rd round pick, Cam Taylor-Britt, cornerback out of Nebraska. 4th round pick, Rachaad White, a lightning running back out of Arizona State. It's a lot of fun. 5th round pick, James Mitchell, the tight end out of Virginia Tech. Our 2 6th round picks is some other punter named Matt Araiza.
Named at a later date.
Punter to be named at a later date. The other one, Juanyeh Thomas, safety out of Georgia Tech, and a Toolsy defensive end, Michael Clemons. Mr. Marino, we appreciate your time, everything that you've done. How do you feel about this draft?
Grade your own draft.
Yeah, grade your draft.
Sign me up. I'll take it. I'll take it right now. I mean, I think it's a job well done. I think it's a scenario that I would be very, very happy with.
And I'll even add, I think that this is the kind of draft that reinforces to me why I think I still want to see a lot of activity in the veteran free agent market, specifically at cornerback, because I think there's so many potential scenarios where there is not an obvious pick at corner that solves our starting need. And, one of them today that was kind of my sneaky fallback, we saw Steven Nelson sign with the Houston Texans, 2-year, $10 million. He got $5 million a year. That's probably the ballpark that we're looking at. And I don't know, do we now have to take a step back to a Xavier Rhodes or do a Joe Hayden? Do they find a way to figure out Stephon Gilmore? Do they find
Kyle
a way
Fuller?
to
Are we
Kyle Fuller, Bryce Callahan?
There's names.
Yeah, Boye, Bryce Callahan. Do they figure out a way to wiggle with Joe Shane to get him to come off a little bit of money for James Bradbury? I really hope that they find a spot there, because I think going into the draft, absolutely needing a starter at cornerback is super dangerous.
Well, I do think you get a starter. I think the problem is Trey White's injury, right?
Yeah.
Like, you
What if
want
he's not
an
ready
additional
till
starter.
November?
I don't love the idea of it being Cam Taylor-Britt and Dane Jackson, right? Like, I would love it if it was a healthy Trey White and Cam Taylor-Britt as your cornerback 2 going into the season. I think you could hide that with the safeties that they have with Taron Johnson. Like, I think you could live through some of those rookie mistakes. Dane Jackson showed me some stuff last year, but he didn't show me that I'm ready for a Cam Taylor-Britt rookie and Dane Jackson lining up for 6 weeks. Let's see. I don't know when Trey's going to come back, but I think that's they got to get a vet in there so that it's whoever ends up being that 2nd round, 3rd round pick ends up going in with a Gilmore, Callahan, or something like that, so that you can, teams will just rip you apart if it's Dane Jackson and a rookie.
I've said this before, but remember, this is the same Sean McDermott that in 2015 coached a 15-1 defense, right? That went to the Super Bowl, was phenomenal. And Josh Norman was an all-pro, They let him walk. Peanut Tillman was their CB2. He retired. And their response to that was to draft James Bradbury in the second round out of Samford, right? Like a small school guy, late second round, like after pick 60. And then Darryl Worley in the third round. And they said, here you go. Here's your starting cornerback tandem on the heels of a 15-1 season. So I don't put it past them to say Dane Jackson, Cam Lewis, and some third round pick is the starting cornerbacks. Like, I just think it's possible. And maybe
if it's Cam Taylor-Britt, maybe that's doable.
Right.
Yeah. So,
good stuff,
all right. Well,
man.
Joe, we've kept you long enough. We appreciate your time. Always awesome to have you on anytime, but it was a lot of fun this time of year. Appreciate it. For anyone who is somehow living under a rock and doesn't know about what you have going on, let them know what to expect with Locked On Bills leading up to the draft.
Daily podcast in the Buffalo Bills. We got the safety and linebacker primer, mock drafts. We're doing it all. So Locked On Bills is the podcast. At the Joe Marino is the Twitter handle. And that's where you can keep track of all the work.
And if you're watching this show on YouTube, go over and check out Joe's Locked On Bills YouTube channel to be able to see the show live and watch it along with him as well.
Appreciate that. Yes.
Right. Appreciate you very much, Joe.
Thanks so much,
soon. Appreciate it. All right. So obviously always awesome to have Joe on every year for this kind of thing. And it was a ton of fun. We'll put out a tweet with the graphic of the mock draft that we did. How do you think that turned out? You know, obviously a lot of people are like cornerback or bust in the first round. You know, when we see a guy like Olave and then again, Parham in the second round, how do you think fans are going to react if we see something like that?
I think there'll be a big section of the fan base that'll be upset. Pat Moran and I have been doing this now where we're on our fourth week of doing mock drafts together. And I keep taking Cam Taylor-Britt in the third round, knowing that he's going to be there. But part of it is we're getting people pretty mad at us for not taking cornerback seriously enough. That was a continuous comment on the YouTube comment, like, hey, you guys aren't really addressing that position. And I felt opposite. There was a couple drafts where we did back-to-back where he took Cam Taylor-Britt and Kobe Bryant, so I think there's a huge section of the fan base that isn't going to view Cam Taylor-Britt in the way that I do. And I'm glad Joe came on and confirmed some priors for me, which I always love when people confirm the things that I think help smart people do it. So that helps. He confirmed some of where I think Cam Taylor-Britt's at. And I do think he could step in day one, and he'll have mistakes, but I think he can do that. You have a section of the fan base that's just going to think of him as he wasn't one of the premier cornerbacks. And so he's not going to be an all-pro. He's not going to be what we need to answer that call. And so I think you'll have a section that don't believe Brandon Beane took it serious enough. But I do think sort of what Joe said and what we've all talked about, like Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier believe they can get more out of this position than people maybe think, and that they can wait a round or two. But dude, if Olave's on the board, fans are really going to be mad that you walk away with another fast, fun toy for Josh. Like, I think everyone will get over it pretty quickly. Weapon. Same how we got over Greg Rousseau. Like, everyone got over that and said, okay, he's toolsy. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, figure it out. Yeah. So it was a lot of fun. This was a great show to be able to do. We got one more leading up before we get right into draft week. And we're going to be there. Person. Yeah, we're going to be there in person. Thanks to our friends over at bookseats.com. It's going to be fantastic. 2 weeks from tonight, I'll be going to bed very early trying to get ready for my flight. But, anything else for the people before we sign off?
Yeah, no, I'm getting really excited now for the draft. Finish up this segment of shows and move on to the draft and all the speculation and all these big boards and all these things we've been arguing about. We're going to find out most of it's total nonsense, and none of us had any idea what's going on, but it's going to be an enjoyable process to find out who is going to be added to this fun Buffalo Bills team. It's just a fun time to be a fan, guys.
Can't wait. And then, I promised myself I wasn't going to go nuts in draft season, but then I will do a deep dive into every single one of the players that they pick to be able to go through and study every little nook and cranny of information I can find on all the guys they pick. I can't wait for that. But it's been awesome. The chat was fantastic tonight. We appreciate you guys. Great guest with Joe. Awesome to be able to see it. Make sure you're checking out all the shows that are on the Cover One Network. We have so many good things going on right now. So many awesome guests jumping on. I know Nate Tice was on with Anthony earlier tonight on Disguised Coverage. All kinds of great people jumping around, being able to help you guys out. But on behalf of Aaron Quinn, I am Greg Tompsett. You've been listening to Cover One Buffalo, and we are out.